How many years can some people exist?
How many roads must Nick Clegg walk down before you call him a man? How many years can this coalition exist? How many seats can the Lib Dems hang on to? The answers could be blowing in the wind, or they might be just over here. First of all, we have to make our way around the now obligatory anti-Lib Dem protest. Nick Clegg was an animal. What animal would he be?
A ferret. Initially warm and cuddly, but probably bite you.
You wouldn't put him down your trousers.
I certainly wouldn't know.
If Nick Clegg was a car, what kind of car would he be?
A Trabant.
Well, if Nick Clegg were a famous musician...
Leo Sayer,
Leo Sayer.
because he's totally confused and outdated.
Seems very quiet. Almost hear a pin drop. Now, you might think we've gone a bit metaphor mad. Coverage of this conference is awash with unlikely reference points. The Sunday Telegraph is comparing Nick Clegg to a chameleon, a cat, a drowning man and a puppet. The Sun says that the Lib Dems' role in the coalition is like that of a wrecking ball, which brings us to a great conference standby, the good old visual prompt. You're happy to be a wrecking ball?
Happy to be a wrecking ball.
Is there anything that hasn't been wrecked so far that you'd like to wreck?
Quite a few things.
Go
The
on.
schools programme, the free schools programme, the academies programme.
Some of their daft immigration policies and their anti-European measures.
Inheritance tax breaks to millionaires.
And stop having a go at the working classes. Stop demonising the poor.
The otherwise intellectual Financial Times said the coalition was like a cake and the Lib Dems were in danger of merely being the icing.
So you wouldn't want cake without icing, would you? I mean, imagine having the Conservatives on their own without Liberal Democrats. So I personally think that icing's the best bit of the cake.
Can you give me a good example of Liberal Democrat icing on a particular policy?
Well, you see, I think that sometimes the Liberal Democrat policy is the cake. So if you take, for example, taking low-paid people out of income tax, in that it's the Liberal Democrats. Liberal Democrats are definitely the whole cake. This is quite difficult talking in metaphors.
Isn't that just the icing on a cake, which is really about very regressive policies as regards the tax system and the benefit system and so on? So you've got a little bit of progressive icing.
No, hang on a second. The taxation changes are progressive. We're taking low-paid people out of paying income tax and we're increasing taxation, for example, on capital gains tax.
I mean, can you imagine what it would be like if it was an unfettered Tory government?
I think we might have one.
No.
Feels
No,
like
we
that
haven't, no.
sometimes.
I mean, do you think the 50p tax rate would survive if it was just
No,
Tory?
that's true. Fair play.
Indirectly, they're giving Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrats a real leg up, because if we are a wrecking ball, if we're as effective as that, then this is a coalition which is in the national interest.
Part of me worries that in the end, this is a bust, and it's only going in one direction, which is a sort of free market, Thatcherite, individualist direction. And as much as there might be policy adjustments, you're either on the bus or you're off.
Well, I don't think the free market Thatcherite model is remotely what we're dealing with.
Where are we? In all seriousness, then, where are we going?
What we've done on banking, for example, is about, breaking up, big global banks to separate out the retail, the consumer. It's very big structural reform. That's anything but free market.
And if you were going to characterise the political direction of this government and where the economy and society will end up 4 years hence, broadly speaking, what's the answer? Ideally, if all works out from a Lib Dem perspective.
Well, from our perspective, we want to make sure that there is a real progressive, a major progressive element to our economic social policy. I'm absolutely committed, and my colleagues are, to making sure it's there.
Is it a wobbly ride?
It's tough. Yeah.
Vince Cable there. If you listen to some of our banker friends, might be the wrecking ball of the City of London.
No, I've got to catch a train. I'm
Really?
sorry. I've done my bit. Yeah.
There we go then, that was Hugh Grant, the self-styled wrecking ball of News International. You don't buy the idea that your passengers on a bus which someone like George Osborne is really in control of?
No, because the conductor on the bus is responsible for the people who get on and off. And if the driver goes mad and drives to the wrong destination, then there won't be many passengers left.
So who's the conductor of the bus? This metaphor is getting very tangled, but who's the conductor of the bus?
Nick Clegg's the conductor of the bus.
Here comes the man himself. Walking into the hall there with a ferret-like determination. Oh, he's going to Asda.
You want to go up close, Nick? Just go up close, right? And if you just look at me, that'd be absolutely great. Thank you. And stay there.
Do you think how we suddenly had this Clegg mania phenomenon during the election, which was just crazy? And I mean, the party didn't know how to handle it. A few months later, and you have the opposite of Clegg mania, and it suggests a sort of a weird kind of volatility in public attitudes to him. One minute he's the repository of all this kind of faith and hope, and the next minute he seems to symbolise for a lot of people everything that's wrong with British politics. And you think, well, they can't both be right. So I don't know what it is about his personality that sort of provokes those extremes.
Maybe he's a blank canvas.
For people's hopes and fears. Yeah. Could be.
There's a metaphor for you.
Yeah, a blank canvas.
Metaphors probably don't really help. They confuse more than they illuminate.
Let me ask you a last question. It strikes me sometimes looking at this that the coalition is moving in one direction perhaps, which is a sort of small state, individualistic, free market direction. And as much as you can alter particular policies, that remains the fundamental direction of travel, and you're either on the bus or you're off.
Well, I think that one of the insights that Liberal Democrats have is we don't think the central state should be bigger. We think we should be devolving power to local authorities, to communities, to individuals. So in a sense, where the power lies might change. I think that we have one of the most centralised systems in the entire Western world in the United Kingdom. And getting more decentralisation is the right way to answer a lot of these challenges.
So where's the bus going? Inspire me then. Where's the bus going? Where's the destination?
Well, of course, the main issue that we have to deal with as a government is restoring our nation's prosperity, dealing with the deficit, building economic growth. I'm sure you were there listening to my speech earlier, and you'll have a full report of all the things I proposed there. I better go.
Okay.
England beat Germany 5-1 in Munich.
We're now going to hear the address by Tim Farron, the party president, tipped as a possible next leader after Nick Clegg. And I suppose to use a football metaphor, he's a bit like a holding midfielder.
I don't have to show my speech to Oliver Letwin in advance, but I sent him a copy anyway just to wind him up. The average Tory minister, bless them, I mean, they work very hard in their department, but they're very rarely seen anywhere near their constituencies. Our ministers are full-on, committed constituency MPs as well as being tasked with a small matter.
This is very interesting. Quite swingeing criticisms of the Tories, really reminding the people in the hall why they're Liberal Democrats.
Who are the bankers back in their boxes over financial restructuring? Nick Clegg. Who stood up against reactionary Tory drivel after the riots? Nick Clegg.
Well, that's an elegantly phrased version of the wrecking ball argument you heard there.
I am in no doubt that being in coalition with the Tories has tainted us. Our identity is blurred. Many of your supporters are confused. They say, we thought you were against the Tories. Why are you shacked up with them now? Well, the picture of the coalition being a marriage is a depressive one, isn't it? It's enough to put you off your tin. Well, if it is a marriage, it's a good-natured one, but I'm afraid it's temporary. We're staying together for the sake of the kids.
Tim Farron, you've just spoken. Your chosen metaphor for coalition politics was
Yeah.
this was a somewhat dysfunctional marriage where
Yeah.
the husband and wife are hanging in there really for the sake of the kids, but divorce is inevitable.
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
There's an opportunity to make a crack about Eric Pickles, let's be perfectly honest. I mean, I think the idea is that there's a temporary nature to it all. I wouldn't say it's dysfunctional. I think in many ways this coalition is not the first coalition, it's just the most functional one, or the first functional one for ages. I mean, the last coalition between Blair and Brown was dysfunctional. This one, we're at least honest about our differences and we have our fights in public. The cuts are a finite period of time. Once they're over, they are over, and we start reinvesting. And actually some of the signals we've got from Danny and others today are we're going to try and do some of that early, if that means getting out of the mess with
David Cameron, during the last election, when he was asked exactly that question, at some point when the economic circumstances improve, would the cuts be reversed? And he said, no, that's you done. That's your point of difference.
He is the leader of the Conservative Party.
Divorce,
he's entitled to say that.
Divorce,
or it's a point of some renegotiation. But the bottom line is, if Liberal Democrats have the power after the next general election to influence that, the state will. I'm not going to just sort of stack it up again for no good reason. But we don't believe that public sector is a bad thing. We think it's a good thing. I mean, the economy is going to, if it improves, it's not going to improve immediately, and we're just going to work really hard to make sure that whilst we go through hard times, that we do it with fairness. And we have to be aware that we're going to have to change course sometimes.
Yeah.
The economic situation is unbelievably difficult, and if we have to make some changes whilst we're on the direction to getting the deficit reduced, we should be doing so.
Okay, so the bus might change course quite
It might
substantially.
well, yeah, who knows?
When you hear Lib Dems having a pop at the Tories, denouncing them even, that isn't a sign that the coalition's about to break apart. It's proof that it's working. People have to let off steam. And a year on from this party's first conference in government, people here do feel a little bit more content. They've got a clearer idea of what the Lib Dems are all about. But underneath it all, you can still sense unease, both about the economy and this party's electoral prospects. The ship might be a bit more steady, but it's still heading into the unknown.
I think the bus is inevitably moving in a direction which is far more akin to changes in the international environment than we in this rather narrow-minded country would ever like to accept.
We're going somewhere exotic with the sound of it.
We're going to boldly go where no man's gone before.